Mofokeng on Radio Pulpit. Heart to heart.
Neville D, I am free. And before that, we gave you Rorisang Tandegiso, and the song is Act 4, verses 12. Mandlenkosi, how are you? Mandlenkosi, how are you? Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for choosing us always as your radio station, number one radio station. And God bless you. Beautiful sounds this afternoon. But I must say that as I'm reading the traffic, when we get to Centurion on N1, where it says police operation at Hanob's River Bridge between John Foster Drive and Booth Avenue, that's where the three bodies of the three constables were found. And that's why there's a police operation right there. So be patient as you're approaching. If you're using that off ramp and all, know that there's queuing traffic in that space. Be patient as you are going through. And always also remember to just say a prayer for the families of the three that are affected in this. Three bodies were found today of the three constables right there. So let's pray for their families as they will be now in preparation of making sure that their loved ones are laid to rest in a dignified manner. On the line, I'm now joined by the CEO and founder of Reach Out SA, talking to Rethabile Molapisane. And today, what we are saying together with Rethabile is creating inclusive workspaces for our awesome ones. Hi, Rethabile. Hi, Rita. How are you?
I'm good, and you?
Good. Are you home? Are you with the kids? Where are you?
No, I'm not with the kids today.
We're missing them in the background.
After the long weekend, mommy needed to get out.
Yeah.
And get back to work.
Yeah, that is like really awesome. So, my queen, we are talking today about inclusivity and creating it in workspaces for our awesome ones. When we're talking about inclusivity, and before we come into creating it, what exactly are we talking about? When we're talking about inclusivity, where awesome ones are concerned?
I always, like to go to the law because that is, something that we can all look towards without bias. I will refer to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, because autism is regarded as a disability. Though it is an invisible disability, it is a disability nevertheless. And there's probably 4 articles that I will quickly, summarize throughout our conversation. The first article, that I want to speak about is one that speaks of equality, and non-discrimination. Being inclusive means that you need to, at any given point in time, in a work environment, make sure that when you are doing your human resource procurement, of trying to see who would be the best person fitted for what. You must also cater for people that have invisible disabilities, such as autism and ADHD. I think it's a policy in many organizations, as is required by the South African Constitution and the Labor Relations Law, that companies must have a policy in place that caters for people with disabilities. But I think many times when we think about disability, we're thinking about a certain look, certain disabilities like Down syndrome, for example, have a specific characteristic look. Certain disabilities, are physical, so you can definitely see this person, is blind, this person, has a hearing problem, or this person, needs to be wheeled around in a wheelchair. But with autism, there really isn't a characteristic. People on the spectrum look like your everyday persons, because the neurological challenge or the neurological disability is happening in the brain. So there's quite a few things, It also speaks to accessibility, of your work environment. Autistic people or individuals that have autism have the right to have access to, physical, interactions and participations in the workplace with colleagues. They have right to have access to digitalization, and also the social aspect. So this would require very careful planning around how do you enable access for individuals on the spectrum in lieu of the fact that they have specific challenges with social skills, for example, or sensitivities around noise, around lighting, and spaces like that. But it also speaks of inclusion and participation, economically, religious, in terms of access to religious communities, access to cultural practices, to be able to be fully human, like the rest of us, where you have the freedoms to participate, in whatever community or, opportunities are out there. So I think it's important to look at still need to do more. Once our kids get into the system and they're diagnosed as autistic or living with autism, we put them in special schools. We say early intervention is important. And we are spending a lot of our energy and a lot of our time and resources in making sure that as many children are placed into the school system as possible. But we do not have a plan for those that are 16 to 18, because that is the exit phase. Because children living with autism become adults with autism. So at that point, how then do we make sure that they are ready for the world? And I think the error there, or maybe the lack of foresight there, is assuming that they do not have potential to be independent adults that can take up employment.
All right. Now, what comes into one's mind, and I was sharing this with the family of Radio Pulpit earlier on, I was like, is it possible really to have inclusive spaces, even schools as well, especially for those on the spectrum? How far can we take inclusivity in these places? Because now they are on the spectrum. So does it depend on how far a person is found on the spectrum, or how does it work?
I think, like it says, it's a spectrum. Not every individual on the autism spectrum is capable of independence, but there are a large number of those that are capable of independence. But I think there's been a blanket approach where we just assume that because they have a disability, they do not have potential. So it really depends on the severity or how far down or up one is on the spectrum. But there's many that fall through the cracks of, this one is incompetent, in terms of learning and ability and excelling at it. This one is unable to, to contribute towards employment in a particular sector. And I'm saying it's an error because we focus so much on the limitations that a person has in terms of their disability, and we do not look at the potential. Most parents will tell you that have people, young people on the spectrum, they will tell you that my child is very good with numbers. My child has got a brilliant memory. They do not forget. My child is very good at constructing things, building things. They build amazing things. I think with Lego and and blocks and all of that, being now incorporated in STEM education through coding and all of that, it's such an exciting area, especially for those on the spectrum. They're doing very, very well in that. So I think, first let us assume potential and focus on what the child is able to do. So when we look at employment opportunities, we're not just looking at just mainstream employment opportunities, but it will be based on the strength of the child. And I think that is the role that senior phase, in our education system and vocational studies come into play to say, okay, as we've been with this child in the school system, where are their areas of strength? They may not be able to compute the mathematics we're able to compute, but they're able to design buildings. That should not be a limitation, especially in the age of AI that we are in. I think it provides such an exciting opportunity for our learners that, are far advanced in terms of other skills, but lack basic foundations.
Sure. I sense that this should start in the doctor's room because that's where these decisions are taken. That no, there are many limitations here. This is a person that you will have to take care of for the rest of your life. Even excluding things like this boy can sing, this girl can dance, or whatever that they can do. And so then it means that change should start right there with the doctors and the parents. Because once the parents hear disability in that manner, where one is or one the child is on the spectrum, then everything is cancelled. Where the child's creativity and all of the whatever that they can become. Now you find some of the parents even who do not have monies to send their children to the private schools that are out there, also having the children at home and the child being not even being stimulated. So how does it work when it comes to that? Is it upon the parent to fight for their awesome one?
I think as a parent, you are the primary caregiver and your child is your primary responsibility. I know quite a lot of parents who, received that same report that your child will never be able to do this, who never gave up, you know. There's many caregivers, especially mothers, that are heroes every day, that are doing the most, who just refuse to give up on the potential their children have, you know. So I think, if you are right when you speak about doctors, many parents, I think, that had their kids diagnosed a couple of years ago when not much was known about autism got pretty much the same response. But I think some of the doctors, some of the younger doctors are more open to, to learning more about what this autism thing is, because the numbers have risen significantly in terms of diagnosis. I mean, in South Africa, a recent report has stated that there's 270,000 individuals that have been documented to be on the autism spectrum. That is a huge number. And there are others that are undocumented. This was a research, when they do the national census that was done. I think it's a community effort. Doctors need to be educated more about autism. It's a multidisciplinary approach. Therapists also, I think, are doing the most in terms of speech and OT. Those are the people that I see have, an interest in learning how to, help the child achieve their best, capability. But, I think when it comes to developing policies that can be implemented in workplaces, it is also important to listen to the voice of adult autism affected people, because they are the people who can tell us their experience and their story, and we can, include them in creating spaces. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money, but it has to. It takes intentionality. For example, if it's in an office where a young person with autism is going to be doing some internship, all you may need to do in that particular workspace is to change the bulb, to a lower, intensity of brightness, for example. It might mean to create, a quiet space where this young person can retreat to if they feel overwhelmed. It might just be a portion of the room with a curtain around it, or, I've been to some public bathrooms and I was very impressed that in some of the bigger malls,
Mm.
there's these moms rooms, but they also, I think, have been created to cater for individuals that also are on the spectrum, because I've seen some things on the walls, like little fidgets that, you can play with, or, like a comfortable space. The same way we were fighting for feeding rooms for moms, we should be fighting the same fight for people with autism, because their needs are also important. So there's many ways around it. Noise cancellation is also an important,
Mm-hmm.
practical thing,
Mm-hmm.
where you can make sure that there are noise cancellation earphones, in your workspaces, if an individual that comes through for the internship doesn't have it. But it also means there just needs to be, support. You need to make sure that there are visuals, pictures, in terms of communication, so the person knows, okay, this is where the toilet is, this is where the bathroom is. I think we have taken for granted the importance of using signs
Mm-hmm.
to communicate, because everybody knows what certain signs mean,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the little things. It's the little things. And it's also learning what type of intern, if you want to take up an intern, is coming to your workspace and what you would need to prepare for them.
It was such an honor for me. I think it's last week when I met a teacher who said she is on the spectrum herself. And I asked her how is she coping at work, and she mentioned
Mm,
that she has headphones when it gets too much.
mhm,
Yeah, if the noise is just too much, and her workspace is also addressing sensory sensitivity things because they are an inclusive kind of school. So they also are
mm,
inclusive where autism is concerned. But now I'm wondering, and I'm asking myself a question, if we have raised enough awareness for workspaces and schools to be knowing and understanding when it comes to your autism kind of I don't know what do we call them that are not neurotypical.
neurodiverse, yeah,
Neurodiverse, yes.
neurodiverse.
I always get tongue tied when I get there. Yes, where yeah.
Yes, neurodiversity, yes.
Yeah, so if because I'm concerned that some of the buildings, for example, that we have,
Mm,
are not even accommodating to somebody on the wheelchair.
yeah,
Most
yeah,
of the buildings in South
basic.
Africa, yeah, where you have to
Mm,
carry a wheelchair-bound person into. I was watching these men carrying a wheelchair up in the air because the stairs were high and they had to go up there with this boy, and it was
mm,
just scary for me to see, and even when they were
mm,
coming down. So if
sure.
we still have such buildings where even the disabilities that are known and seen, like you have explained,
Mm,
that with a person with autism, for example, it's the person is normal like everybody else. So it's hard to can say, oh, he's got autism. It's not written on your forehead. So,
yeah.
but if we still have places like that where some of these disabilities are still not understood, how much more about autism? Have we raised enough awareness around this?
I think, things are a lot better now, in terms of what things were 10 years ago, for example, or even 5 years ago.
Mm.
I recently attended an autism conference at UNISA during, this month of April. And we had representatives from government there speaking, including those of women's the ministerial portfolio for women and children and persons with disabilities, and there seems to be a lot in terms of policy,
Mm.
in terms of accommodating individuals also on the autism spectrum. And this includes individuals also that have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder as well, and many others, So I think in terms of policy, it seems to be encouraging on paper, but I guess as with all good policies, they amount to nothing if implementation is doesn't happen at grassroots levels. But I was encouraged at least to see that there are some processes that are in place
Mm.
in making sure that those accommodations are being made. And perhaps while we wait, because it takes time from policy to implementation, this is our role as advocacy groups, as parents, as special needs schools, as those that advocate for individuals with disabilities to continue, making noise,
Mm. I'm just asking myself,
about this.
Rethabile, also that if let's say parents are, I'm making an example about children. Let me go to that one where parents would want their children to be in neurotypical schools, and the children are neurodiverse, and they are in that space. Wouldn't it frustrate the children themselves? Because yes, you spoke about also special schools that the very moment a diagnosis comes out, then a child is sent through to a special school, for example. And I also and then I also ask myself about the stimulation thereof at each school, depending on which school the child would land to.
Yeah.
I have concerns about that. So if we are taking them to a normal, let me use the word normal school, wouldn't
Mainstream.
it, a mainstream school, wouldn't it frustrate the child more and frustrate the parents and the educators? Because even the education system, yes, we are talking inclusivity in schools, but it's
We're not there
far-fetched.
yet.
We are not yet there yet. How many of our
Mm.
teachers are trained to address such? Talking about
Yeah.
awesome ones from diverse diagnoses. Might be autism,
Mm.
might be cerebral palsy, might be whatever back injury, and one is on the wheelchair. Might be whatever that's there. But how many of our teachers are also trained in that line?
I will start with what you asked pertaining to, taking a child to, with neurodiversity, to a mainstream school. I honestly think, it's important for parents to understand and to accept the child that they now have. They've always had the child, but new information means that now you have to look at the reality, of the child. I'm not saying do not assume potential, but
Yeah.
also have an understanding that there are some limitations, and struggles that the child has, such as sensory, dysregulation, not being able to process information like sound, lighting, you know, too many colors, brightness. You can just imagine if that was you. Just spending, the older you grow, I think you have the less tolerance for noise. If you go
Mm,
to a,
mm,
like a
mm,
nightclub
mm, mm,
with
mm,
the lights flashing and the sound is very high and all of that, you feel kind of overwhelmed, right?
mm.
So think about a child who has to go through that kind of intensity even more, because sound actually hurts. It hurts, you know.
Mm,
You can see them closing their ears and shrinking their faces.
mm,
So I always, my heart always breaks. And I remember going to a preschool where my daughter was to check on her,
mm,
and there was a little boy there that was crying the whole time the kids were playing outside. And I went to the teacher and I said, that child looks like they might be struggling with sensory overload. What is the story there?
mm,
Only to find out that the child could be on the spectrum, but the parents are in denial
mm.
and refuse to take the child through the process of getting the forms filled, the recommendations done to the Department of Education, and getting a formal assessment for the child. It is a disservice because then you have this dysregulated child who
Mm,
cannot function and who is in pain
mm.
and who is frustrating everybody, including you as a parent. But the
Including
sooner
himself.
you
He
accept,
himself is frustrated.
he himself is frustrated. So, because that kind of behavior is communication. He's screaming, help, 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 help,
Mm,
get me out of here, And the sooner you accept the kind of child that you have and begin to do your own research, there's a lot more now, in terms of support. There really is. April, everybody knows, is going to be an autism awareness seminar somewhere. There's a march on the streets. There's a bit more visibility in terms of people saying autism, we are here, you know. So that does not do the child service. I've seen how parents that I've met were very frustrated in the beginning, and they were, going through the same thing. And I said, get your child out of there, find, a hospital, get a diagnosis, and start the process of finding a special school for your child. They come back later now, and their children are more regulated. They are thriving in school, and there's hope and there's peace between mom and dad, mom and school, and all the dynamics around the child. And then secondly, are we ready? I do not think we are there yet. More still needs to be done. Yeah, definitely.
You spoke also about workspaces where sensory considerations can be put into place, like having quiet places, adjusting the light, noise management, things like that. I'm also asking myself a question about how many employers are aware of autism or autistic adults who are out there. And it's also awesome to see that people in their adulthood are still getting the diagnosis to say, no,
Yeah.
you're autistic and you're on the
Yeah.
spectrum, and this is where you're at on the spectrum. That is awesome to see.
Yeah.
But how many employers are aware of this? And what can be changed in to make work arrangements flexible and, awesome for somebody who's on the spectrum?
Yeah, I think, education and training, is very important, for organizations to learn more about the invisible disabilities, definitely, because there's also individuals in the system who are autistic but are undiagnosed, and some that have ADHD and are undiagnosed. I always laugh with, a colleague of mine, and we always look at each other, and I'm like, you have ADHD, and he points right back at me and says, so do you. So we identify each other because we can see, the way that we function. Because those individuals with, with this invisible, disabilities are gifted, incredibly great memory. They can work for very long hours, and when they hyper focus on something, they become experts at it. So the work is, they also have OCD, which is, being obsessive about something. So you don't give up until the work is done, and it's done excellently. They're loyal. They stick to routines and deadlines, and so they really make great employee assets. But employers need to know that there is, almost like a risk benefit type of situation, to say you weigh the risk against the benefit. If you give the individual support, then you are able to also manage their output as well. So most people that come up with innovative ideas, groundbreaking research, new formulas, and all of that, you're out at Einstein's and we're neurodiverse individuals. So in this new age where we are looking at new solutions to new problems, especially, at this dawn of the fourth industrial revolution, those are the types of people that we need.
Those are the type of people that we need to accommodate in these spaces and create a working environment that is awesome even for them. I'm just, things are just running in my head, and I'm asking myself, then it means that employers should be taking everyone to be, or looking at everyone through that through that window to say, this might be a diverse person. So how about we put this into place? Then it would help a lot of people in the workspace, because, as you say, there are those who are undiagnosed cases. But when you know and you look at the person, you're like, yeah. But they are not diagnosed as well. And so I'm wondering if it should be like one size fits all. So we're going to do it this way. The office is going to be run like this, minimal noise. minimal fragrances or visual aids,
You
written
know?
instructions, plain language for everyone. I'm also, as you were
Yeah.
saying, I was just thinking as you were saying that as we grow older, we can't deal with noises and um, lights and all. And I'm just thinking about how many people were saying now, as on Facebook, for example, that they can't even have their phones in on their like as an earpiece. That rather talk
Mm,
via the the speaker of the phone because they
yeah.
can't take it anymore. And then you ask yourself questions: what's happening? Why are people like that? But I'm thinking many people are neurodiverse, but they are not even aware that they are. So should it
Yes.
be that employers should say, no, we're going to do it like this for everyone? Would it make it easier for those who are neurodiverse when they come in? Or should they identify? Because also there is a thin line between stigma and
Mm.
yeah.
I think, even as much as not, not all organizations, for example, have implemented like ramps, for example, in their buildings to
Yeah.
make, access more better. Because even government buildings that offer government services, not all of them have those provisions in place. You know, so I think, it's a tough one, but I
Mm,
think public-private partnerships, are important in this conversation, even as government is having these conversations in their different units, to invite the public sector to say, how do we compare notes and empower each other to be able to make room for this particular group of individuals,
all right.
and other individuals with disabilities as well. It's not impossible.
Okay.
It really is just about political will. Are we willing to make the investment?
All right.
Are we willing?
All right.
Because other countries are doing it.
Wow. Let's take a break. And then when we come back, we are closing off by answering the question: is it really possible, Rethabile, to create this inclusive workspace for our awesome ones? Let's take a break. We're coming back, taking the sounds of Ambanira Mari, You Gave Me Love.
You're at 657 AM, radio caring 24 hours a day.
Sounds coming there from Ambani Ramaru, You Gave Me Love, and talking about giving one love, talking about giving love to the neurodiverse individuals' love. I am with Rethabile Molapisane. We are creating inclusive workspaces for the neurodiverse, for our awesome ones as well, everybody who on the spectrum and everybody who is with a disability. Now, Rethabile, one question, the last question for the day. Is it possible to have inclusivity in our workspaces? Is it possible?
100% possible. Everything seems impossible until it is done.
Yeah.
I think we need to not look at those living with disabilities as an inconvenience we need to accommodate as employers, but as a right. There is a legal requirement on it. It is their right to also have access to inclusive workspaces so that they can be able to have economic participation like everybody else. It is a human right. It's not just a nice idea. It is a human right. And I think if we look at it from that perspective, they have the same rights as every South African under the Constitution of South Africa, and also under, the United Nations Human Rights, Convention that we all as a country, have to, abide to because we ratified it. So I think it starts there, in our understanding as employers, and as institutions and organizations that it is a legal requirement. I mean, there's even incentives for it.
Yep.
But I think we need to move away from thinking about disability as people on wheelchairs, because even the signs that show disability show someone in a wheelchair. Disabilities are broader than that. So it is possible. It is possible. But I think, like I've said before, we need to have that conversation at the highest level, public-private partnerships, where we speak about what does that look like for individuals that have invisible disabilities, because even being deaf is invisible.
All righty
But
then.
we've made accommodations in workplaces where there is one person in the workspace in an organization that can sign so that the individual can communicate with that one person,
Okay.
So it's possible.
It
Absolutely.
is possible. Rethabile, thank you so much for talking to us. For those of us who'd like to talk to you directly, how do we do so?
If you would like to talk to me directly and to hear about the work that we do at Reach Resources, you can either drop me a WhatsApp on our business number 071 971 5814, or you can drop me an email at rjmolapisane, MOLAPISANE, at gmail.com.
All righty then. Thank you so much for talking to us this afternoon. We'll be back again because this is not a once-off 1 month thing, but it's something that continues for 365 days a year. Have a great one. We love you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Her numbers again, 071 971 5814. That is Rethabile Moshoeshoe-Molapisane, 071 971 5814. And I'm signing out.